Chris.
man.
Why don't we get started? Aloha. On behalf of the Daniel K. Inouye Institute, thank you all for joining us for Paul Hana and Politics in partnership with the University of Hawaii's Public Policy Center. This is our second virtual gathering. Over the years, we did this live in Kaka'ako, and we started it right after the senator passed as our way of honoring the value that he placed in sitting down, putting the electronics to the side, looking at each other, and sharing, talking, discussing, resolving, or as we say in Hawaii, just talking a little story. Before I turn the program over, I'd like to do a quick shout out to Ken Inouye, Senator's son, who is listening in, as well as to Jennifer Hirano, Irene's daughter, who is tuning in from Los Angeles. You know, we definitely and dearly miss Irene's generous and guiding hand. And now it is my pleasure to turn the program, Building Our Economy in a Bubble and Taking Advantage of the Netflix Generation, to our moderator, Hollywood producer, Pied Piper, and all-around local boy extraordinaire, Chris Lee. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Sarah and Raylene, for putting together all the tech side of this. It's a great honor to be here and to be here with so many friends. And also, I just want to thank, I can't see everybody out there, but I'm so grateful that so many people have RSVP'd for today's get together. I'm totally forgot. Am I supposed to, a little bit of Colin first? No, it's the very end. Okay, so I'm going to get started, and I want to introduce one of Hawaii's newest residents. His name is Dan Lin. He has been a friend for a very long time. He's going to tell you how long, unfortunately. And he is responsible for such enormous hits as Aladdin, the It series, the Lego series, Sherlock Holmes, The Two Popes, which was one of my favorite films last year on Netflix. And I think a total of about $5 billion in box office. And he is now making his home here in Hawaii. His two sons are enrolled at my alma mater. And I couldn't be more delighted that Dan is working with all of us here today to turn Hawaii into a production hub. So Dan, why don't you talk a little about your journey and
Yeah, aloha everyone. I never thought of Chris as the Pied Piper, but now that he's described that way, he probably is, certainly in my life. Just as an introduction, when I was a junior in college, just to date myself, in 1993, I was a student and I had no idea what I wanted to do after college. And this guy walked in from Hawaii and said he was a senior vice president at TriStar Pictures in film production. And I heard him speak in front of hundreds of students. And it was actually that speech that inspired me to get into the entertainment business. So again, not knowing I would follow Chris's path all the way to Hawaii, many years later, I'm here. My kids are fortunate enough to get into Iolani, and I'm just excited to be here. But I'm here for several reasons. One, I was already developing several projects in Hawaii and really wanted to take that much more seriously here. So both in film and TV. And I felt like if I could be here, maybe have a better chance of getting those made, working with folks like Donnie and understanding the local production environment. And so some of those have been announced and some haven't, but I'm developing a few projects. But really, I wanted to experience a new culture. I felt like there's a real opportunity here for Hawaii to build itself into a production hub. As you know, it's one of the safer places in the US right now. And there's a real opportunity to make more films and TV shows here if we built the right infrastructure. Certainly, I'm excited about what's happening at West Oahu campus. I was fortunate enough to go visit Chris's new film and TV studio out there, but I think it's a real opportunity to do more, and excited about bringing local stories to the big screen and also to help employ more local crews.
Great, thank you, Dan. So Amy Hill, I've known even longer than Dan. We actually, the two of us, our first motion picture was in San Francisco. We were both just out of college. And it was a wonderful experience, and we've been friends ever since. And I couldn't be more delighted than when she was cast as Kumu on the reinvention of Magnum PI. At the same time, her daughter enrolled at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and is a student there. And I think you're going into your third season, and now you're a resident, and you actually own 2 homes here. So Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I guess you really are the Pied Piper, Chris, because we just follow you wherever. We met in San Francisco. I moved to LA after you moved to LA. And then you started bringing us here to enjoy life. And then eventually I ended up working here. I mean, I started working here before with 50 First Dates, and I played Jason Momoa's mom in North Shore. That was very nice. And, but, we've always had an affinity, and I feel like because of Chris, I had a family here. Chris's Ohana is my Ohana, and I knew Donnie from a long time ago too. So it's always been a great place for comfort and creativity. I did my first solo show here in the 90s. I made a solo show and ended up coming here and performing at Chris's brother-in-law's coffee house on Kapahulu. So, I mean, there's just so many ways that I've been involved in local activities. And it just felt, my daughter actually got into UH before I got the Magnum gig. And because she also felt always this was someplace that she just loved to be. So she got into her favorite school, her first pick school, and then I got Magnum PI. So once we started realizing that this may go on for like Hawaii Five-0, maybe 10 years, I decided that, might as well just settle in. I haven't given up LA yet. I still have property there. I also have property in San Francisco because I never really gave that up. I maybe need to start, facing my future and just stay here. But the thing that I love about working here is that I feel as though when we're on the crew on Magnum is, especially now during the pandemic, we have more people that are local that are working on the crew, they have a history of experience. They know what they're doing. We also have a lot of ACM grads that are working on the crew that came out of Chris's programs. So this is really, we have people who know what they're doing here, and I'm glad that we're giving them the opportunity to continue to work. There's a lot of projects, I think, that are coming here. And for me, just to look around and see people that look like me on the crew is so exciting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So Melvin Mar has shot here before. He did the reboot of Jumanji. And most recently, as a television producer, he's done shows like FOB. But most recently, Disney Plus has announced his newest series, which is called Doogie Kamealoha with MD, which is an update of the Doogie Howser show, except the protagonist is a 16-year-old part Native Hawaiian girl, and they hope to be in production very soon on that. So, Melvin, why don't you talk about that program?
Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. And, Chris, by the time I knew who you were the president of TriStar, so you're like the godfather. And Dan is the big brother. I remember I used to bug him all the time about helping me find a job. I'm sure he was like, who is this kid? Go away. I have real business to do. But it's, and Amy, it's an honor to be here with you. You're like a legend, and this is so cool. But yes, I love Hawaii. I think my first experience with it was Jumanji, working there. And I admittedly did not think about it beyond, oh yeah, we should go to Hawaii to shoot the jungle portion because I don't want to go to Australia and we don't want to go anywhere else. And you get there and, on that movie, we were there for a while and you're just taken by like the people and the place and just like, it's just a really awesome place to work and live if you can do it. And so right after the two movies, I made it sort of a priority to figure out what would be the next thing to do in Hawaii. And I'm sure we could do another Jumanji movie if that comes along. But on the TV side, I'd always wanted to remake Doogie Howser. And it's mainly because my mother, it was the one TV show my mother would push me to watch because she was hoping I'd be a doctor and maybe somehow it would influence me, but no. So this is rebooting the Doogie Howser franchise is the closest Lucille Mar is going to get to a doctor's son. So I reached out to Courtney Kang, who wrote, wrote on Fresh Off the Boat for a few seasons, and I knew she was born in Hawaii, and later on moved to Philadelphia and grew up there. So I just pitched the idea of just like, what if female Doogie? And she goes, can she be Hawaiian? Can she be half? Anything you want. And so she came up with this amazing pitch of just doing half Korean, half Irish, and as a native Hawaiian family. So we're really digging into the culture of Hawaii that we didn't really get to do on Jumanji movies.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So Donnie gets to work with everybody here, and she does, as she has for, I don't know, it's been maybe a couple decades since I've been home, certainly. Donnie, you can unmute, but just talk a little bit about yourself, and then we'll circle back.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here, and I mahalo Jen and Jill and everyone. Chris, certainly, Chris and I go way back, and in keeping with the Pied Piper Godfather theme, my experience with Chris is as resident DJ at our high school parties at my mom's house, and Chris would show up in his tiny car with his huge speakers and his twin turntables and his mirror ball. And he would set up the whole thing in my mom's living room, and we danced the night away. And he was, he really did become the Pied Piper. And we have been working together ever since. When he decided to move home, it was a massive blessing for the state of Hawaii, because he had this vision for what Hawaii could become. And we are well on our way to realizing that vision. And that is something that we can all collectively be proud of. And deepest gratitude to you, Chris, for pulling us all together and for keeping the train moving, because it's not been easy. I'm born and raised in Hawaii. I am Native Hawaiian, despite the, blonde hair, blue eyes, but I have a deep aloha for Hawaii and for our culture. And, when I hear projects like Melvin, the Doogie Kame Aloha, I just get so excited, because the world knows Hawaii by the media that has been created over the last century, more than a century. And it is exactly the kind of project we want to encourage to thrive here. I represent the film office, which is a very useful aspect of the building of our film industry. We have been around since 1978. I have a small skeletal crew of very hardworking individuals. We handle everything from tax credits to film permits to getting Dwayne Johnson's boxer here during Jumanji. You name it, we are responsible for making all those things happen. And I have to say that this is the most challenging period that I have ever had to deal with in my entire career as state film commissioner, reopening the state in the midst of this pandemic and trying to calm the legitimate fears of the public who don't understand what the film industry can bring to Hawaii, but more importantly, how tightly controlled, regulated, safe this industry is. And it has been just a constant, daily, hourly education of people in our community as to the safe way forward process, protocol for testing and safety highly regulated safety protocols to make sure that all of our film productions are able to get the job done, but in the most safe environment. So I'm here as resident cheerleader behind the scenes, just, you know, cheering all you guys on, and really very proud of the hope that this industry offers Hawaii right now.
Donnie is such a problem solver, and I know one of the biggest problems is getting people's pets, stars' pets to Hawaii, or getting a water buffalo over to Kauai for a tropic thunder that turned out to be
A pregnant water buffalo. Thank you very much.
I know. So the question and answer box is open, I just want to say, and people have started asking questions, and we will get to them in a little bit, but if you'd like, you're welcome to type them in now. Amy, because this question does come up a lot about safety and COVID. And you're working on Magnum, which I think you've just started your 3rd week of production now. Tell us what your production days are like and how much they've changed and how safe they are.
I feel, you know, and I'm a very safety conscious person, because as soon as this pandemic hit, I found myself in that age group that was in more danger than anybody else. So what's interesting is it doesn't feel that different, except we're all wearing masks, and there's a COVID guy on the set who says, put your mask back on, put your mask back on, put your mask back on. Because, you know, when we start acting, we take it off and then we put it back on immediately after. But, you know, in just life, we forget. But everybody else on the crew has their mask on all the time, and they can't get close to us. He reminds them constantly, move back, don't get, no, you're too close, move back. And we are tested. There are zones, and the red zone is where the actors are and where the director is and where the makeup people are, hair and makeup and wardrobe. Those people all get tested 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we're constantly tested. Before we can access the stage or the set, we have to do the, you know, test, the temperature check and the questionnaire, so we can, I mean, there's just so much safety involved. And, you know, I'm going to lose weight because I can't eat all day. You can't go to Crafty and just, you know, pick food. You have to like actually decide if you want a sandwich, then they wrap it for you, and they just, it's all so I just, and then did lunch too, is very all wrapped up and put through a little, you know, hole in a plastic thing. You are unbelievably safe on set.
Yeah.
People are so careful.
I hear the shooting days are more efficient too, because no one can bring entourages onto set. So
no,
you don't lose
no
any time to that.
entourages. Jay has his assistant, so I guess she must be tested 3 times a week too. But you know, she's she's the only one that's sort of outside. Yeah, and we're really, even when we are, you know, waiting for lighting setup or something, the actors all are sitting together, but we're 6 feet apart.
Right.
And we have our masks on.
Yeah. So I've already started getting questions about Dugi Kamealoha, and is it going to be shot here, and about casting and everything. And I know there's not much you can tell us. I mean, things are still secret because things haven't been announced except the show. But is there anything you can tell us more about the show itself?
We just started casting. We are looking everywhere for the Dugi character. We've gotten a lot of submissions from Hawaii. Digging through that. I saw a question of whether or not it's going to be entirely shot there. Don't know. We're trying to figure it out now. There's a version, we're in the sort of pre-production version of it where we're budgeting everything. And there's a version of it where there is entirely in Hawaii. There's a version of it where it's about 50-50 with LA. There's a version of it where it's majority LA and some Hawaii. But we're at the stage where we're just, you know, we're doing all the studies, you know, to see what's good financially as well as safety wise that, you know, Amy has brought up. I think, you know, Hawaii, is exciting because in itself is kind of a bubble, and it's the safest place in the country. You know, but there's a lot in this COVID age. There's an added layer of all of it too, as we're trying to figure out the financial impacts.
Right, but even with our incentives, it's a bit of a tough sell to the studios, isn't it, to come here, because it is expensive to shoot here.
Well, it's expensive to shoot there, and most people's you know, sort of connection with it is going there on vacation. So you have to you have to break them of the idea that you just want to go to Hawaii for a while, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, that, and you know, there is the expense. It is more expensive in Hawaii compared to the mainland and other like tax cities around the mainland, you know. But I think your incentives helps. It could be better if I'm being completely honest, but it is a really good place to start.
Well, I think all of us on the panel are hoping that they can roll back the cap that was imposed a couple years ago onto our incentives, because I believe in the 2018, which was the last year before the cap, we had, Donnie, correct me if I'm wrong, about $480 million in direct spend here in the islands. And in 2019, this year doesn't really count because of COVID, but in 2019, that dropped to about $340 million in production, in direct spend.
It was more, it was probably all in 2019 was just over 400 million, but it did drop from 2018 for sure. And that's about 4,500 jobs. Yeah. So it does make a difference. And there is some question, I think, in Hollywood about the cap. And I know that Donnie has to deal with those questions all the time from various productions that are hoping to come here and making sure that they actually can access, because incentives drive the industry. And maybe Dan, who has shot all over the world and with different studios, and I do want to get you talking about Lilo and Stitch in a second, but maybe talk about comparing Hawaii with shooting in other places. I think Aladdin, you were where, in Dubai, or where did you go for Aladdin?
In Jordan and in London.
And
but you know, right now I was in Argentina and Italy. But that was less for the incentive and more for the actual locations, because we wanted to shoot where some of the scenes actually took place in real life. But I think the challenge that I'm dealing with, and I'm sure Melvin's dealing with as well, is that we're competing with other states and other areas. And so, you know, the place that most of Hollywood is shooting in right now is Atlanta, and they have such capacity. You know, I'm told in Atlanta they can shoot more than 50 movies and TV shows there. And so it's a question of, they now have shot so much there that they have really deep crews, which is really important, because as Melvin, I'm sure, is dealing with now, you don't want to fly in crews to Hawaii. It's really, really expensive. And it kind of defeats the purpose, because you really want to come here and take advantage of the local crews and local expertise here. So I think deep crews is an issue. You know, I'm told there's only about maybe enough crew here for maybe 3 shows, but I think that's one issue. The second is the incentive that everyone's been talking about. And in Atlanta, it's 30%. And so here it's 20%. So when you're competing against that, it's really difficult, because not only do they have a bigger incentive at some of the other states, but also the cost of living here is so high, as we all know. And so Donnie and I have talked, you know, for line producers that use a shorthand of how much is a hotel room, you know, and the average hotel room cost in Hawaii is $300, you know, whereas in other places in the US, it's $150. So that just gives you, you know, it's really just a ballpark, give you a sense of how expensive it is to shoot here. And lastly, you know, we need to bring more creators here, creators who actually grew up here. I love that Amy's here and made her home here. People who actually, the talent, you want them to live here because they're going to want to work here more. So, you know, Dwayne Johnson right now, he lives in Hawaii, in Atlanta, and his office is in Atlanta. You don't want that. You know, you want us we want to bring Dwayne back here. You want to get Jason Momoa back here. You want them to have their home base here, because naturally, as you know, as actors become more and more powerful, they just want to shoot at home.
Right. And also, we're lacking infrastructure. I mean, Atlanta, Georgia, they have, I think, 5 different studio complexes. The largest, I believe, is 700 acres. I think that's where they do all the Marvel movies. And we have Diamond Head, which has been the home of 5-0 for the last 7-8 years. And now it's the home of Magnum. Before that, it was the home of Lost, but it's not capable of accommodating more than one show, and it's not capable of accommodating the kind of movies like Jumanji or Aladdin that both Dan and Melvin have been involved with. So even if they do come to Hawaii to shoot our locations, they can't then go into a studio environment where they have the massive sound stages that have that you can build your sets, or what's happening today, which is virtual production. And I know, Dan, you're doing a show right now with virtual production. Yeah,
we're about to start a show next summer, a live action version of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And for those of you that don't know what virtual production is, it's basically the way they shoot the TV show Mandalorian, where people don't know, but that's all shot in a stage in Manhattan Beach, which is south of Los Angeles. Yeah. They're not going to Jordan or Abu Dhabi or Morocco, even though it looks, dusty. But what happens is they build these huge LED screens and they shoot different fantastical worlds in a stage. And so that's happening. So it allows some shows that are just honestly very difficult to get made, but also it's a real risk for Hawaii because like Melvin comes here because he wants to shoot Jumanji, he wants the beautiful landscapes. But as technology evolves, you can put that landscape on an LED screen. So there's a risk that Hawaii may even lose some of the films and TV shows that come here to shoot for the beauty of Hawaii, because technology may allow you to do it on a green screen or on an LED screen. And so that I'm concerned that, Chris, there's a risk of that unless Hawaii starts building some of these stages.
Yeah, Donnie, I heard, I think it was from Tui and IATSE, that there was a big show that came here and all they shot was plates. All they shot was scenery and background. They didn't bring anything except a second unit camera crew. There was no actors. There was no hair and makeup. There was no build, but they just wanted to shoot our scenery. And then that goes into the digital sets.
Yeah, and that's been happening more often than not in the last several years.
Wow.
And honestly, on the second Jumanji, we didn't do the LED screens on stage, but a lot of it was an effect, and we just went to Atlanta. Like if you look at the ratio of shooting in Hawaii from the first movie to the second movie, the first movie was primarily in Hawaii, and we went to Atlanta for a week. But on the second movie, it was reversed because we needed more of a controlled environment, and we ended up just shooting in Hawaii for like 10 days maybe, and then the rest of it was in Atlanta, both for the stages as well as, I mean, Dwayne lives there, so there. It's just the ease of getting there as the crew, like Dan mentioned, the crew base, even to small things like equipment is just easier to get, on the mainland. Everything you shoot in Hawaii, you have to factor in the shipping time and cost. On smaller things like on television shows, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're shooting something, a larger scale movie, like at night, like the first Jumanji was, you need some stuff that is going to take some shipping.
I think that's so true. And what we're all striving for is striking that balance. And it's so difficult because, you talk about average room nights and they're expensive, but what is it that Hawaii has to offer that you can't get in Atlanta, that you can't get in someplace in the Northeast, that you can't get in the middle of the country? And I know that on the scale of things is very low in the decision-making process, but all of you who have experience filming in Hawaii can attest to, in my opinion, understand I'm biased, but just, the quality of your end product. I think with all of the various elements combined in Hawaii, I think it would stand the test of time with any other place. And I know that that's a hard thing to put a dollar amount on, but that's why we work so hard, because the aloha spirit and the warmth and diversity and the geologic diversity of this place and the culture being second to none, those things are valuable. They're valuable to our people and they're valuable to this community. So it's trying to strike that balance and find the sweet spot that works financially for our productions, but also really, really does our community proud, because Chris and I are always talking about how this industry is the safest, and it is the you know, provides the best paying jobs and all of those things. So it's just trying to find that sweet spot that works for everyone.
I will also say that like proximity is a really great thing about Hawaii, because, you know, if your project is sort of skewed towards the Asian market, and I remember on the first Jumanji, obviously, Dwayne has a huge following in China, and I remember doing the junket for it. We decided to do it in Hawaii at the Four Seasons in Ko'olina, and it made it really easy for Dwayne to like do his China press, because we would just have people from mainland China just come. It's only a 5-hour flight and they're ready to go. We were able to really take advantage of that market, in addition to Dwayne going later on, but like we were able to shoot things and just have things banked for that market. And it's easier for actors if you ever, you know, cast that direction. And I think that's it's a big plus. In contrast, in the second movie, we ended up doing the junket in Cabo San Lucas, and we flew the same group of like reporters and people from China out, and they were so jet lagged that they were down for a day, and we had to like punt their stuff to the next day because they were just like walking zombies, you know. Whereas Hawaii would have been so much better. I just remember sitting there thinking like, well, we can't shoot any of this because they're asleep.
No, I think the pivot to Asia is really crucial. You know, we were once considered to be in the middle of nowhere, and now we're really in the center of everywhere, because, you know, I know if I'm doing any business in China, the calls start at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I can still talk to LA at 6 p.m. and it's only, you know, 9 p.m. on the East Coast if you have to. Dan, there's a question here. I'm going to throw it to you. I'm writing a feature set in Hawaii. What resources can you suggest for me to get it sold? Thanks.
I mean, to get it sold is going to be still like traditional avenues. What I would always suggest for an up and coming writer is to get a manager first, especially right now. There's so much dissension between agents and the WGA, the Writers Guild. And still some of the major agencies don't even have an agreement with the Writers Guild, namely William Morris, WME, and CAA. So I would really focus on, one, writing a great script. Two, if you have a friend group or writer friend group, really have other writers read your work before you go out with it professionally. And in some ways have your writer friends read the work, but also you should read their work as well. I would then try to get a manager. And in the meantime, because I don't advise you to go to LA right now, it's just not safe. There's some great classes online. And there's some great classes I've been recommending to friends here in Hawaii. You know, Robert McKee normally does his story seminar, and a lot of companies, including mine and Pixar, send their teams to McKee's seminar. But usually it's only done in person, but he's moved it all online. So how are you? And this is not an ad for him. I don't work for him, but I just told my own team, you know, take this time. And it's not just that. There's Sundance. There's lots of different avenues online right now in screenwriting. Take the time in the digital world to refine your craft, learn from the best. There's so many great people teaching online that really take your time to learn online.
Now, I want to just lean on you just a little bit further, because you're not just a producer. You took some of your Hollywood money and you started something called Ride Back in Hollywood, which transformed a rundown, abandoned post office station in Filipino town. And now it is a completely fabulous creative hub with people like Margot Robbie and working there, along with Warner Animation and stuff. Could you just, and I know you want to try to work towards creating that here in Hawaii with Ride Back Ohana as the next step in your career. So maybe just talk a little bit about what that process was for you.
Yeah, we just had a vision that we wanted to do something different. We wanted to build a different kind of production studio in LA. And we found an abandoned post office. It was actually, you know, lots of drug dealers. It's really a decrepit place, all boarded up in historic Filipino town, which is about 10 minutes north of downtown LA. It's an area that is lower income, but it's a fantastic area. It's called Historic Filipino Town, but now it's only about a third Filipino, and the rest of the 2/3 is Latino, because as the Filipinos had more wealth, they moved east in LA to the suburbs. But it's an area that we moved into because we wanted to show that we could create great content while still contributing to the community. And when I say contributing to the community, we view our superpower as storytelling. And so we spend a lot of time not only making movies and TV shows, but helping the community tell their stories. You know, so for instance, the elementary school right across the street from our studio is Union Elementary School, which is the largest elementary school for first-time immigrants in LA. And unfortunately, in a Trump era, they have a very tough time, you know, coming to the country and staying here and surviving. And so a lot of the families have a really tough time. And so I actually went over to the school, and being a naive producer, I went to ask the principal, you know, what can we do? We really want to give back to your community. You know, can we get donations for you? Can we buy you guys computers? And she said, no, Dan, what you can do is really help us tell our stories. Telling stories gives our kids hope. And so we started this program called Young Storytellers, where every semester, and Amy, I'm going to hit you up for this. But
I'm
every
doing
semester,
it. I'm in. I'm in.
Every semester, we have 10 fifth graders that are chosen, and we go and we teach those fifth graders how to write a screenplay. And at the end of the semester, we have our friends like Amy, hopefully, but we have professional actors perform that screenplay in front of the school, in front of their families and their parents and their classmates. And we have famous actors like Harry Shum and Tony Hale and Joe Coy, lots of different actors come and perform that. And it's just the best time that we have with the kids. But we're not trying to turn these kids into screenwriters, but we're trying to help them tell their story, because as they tell their story, they're trying to work out some of their issues. So that's just one thing that we do, Chris. But the idea is like, how do you give back in a public-private partnership?
Yeah, and I think those fifth graders, they come from the school with the most, they're like first generation immigrants, right? To Los Angeles. So it's just great. And I think there's huge opportunities here. If this is Jordan Kendall with the question of the twins from Iolani, I think they've worked for half the panel already. But Jordan is asking, how does Hawaii create a support system that incentivizes the next wave of local filmmakers telling local stories? And I'll just start by saying that was the whole point of ACM to begin with, because the premise of the school was that how can we be New Zealand? And I bring up New Zealand in that it's farther away from Hollywood than we are. It has an indigenous population with indigenous stories, and they developed their filmmakers, really starting with a woman named Murata Mita, who was my first hire at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, who was really the godmother of everybody from Peter Jackson to Taika Waititi. And I think New Zealand has always been a good example of how, as someone earlier was saying, that people want to shoot where they live. And so because Peter Jackson said to Hollywood, if you want me to do Lord of the Rings, I'm going to do it in New Zealand. And then he built up Weta and the facilities, which is, now James Cameron lives there. And that's the sort of thing that we need to do here, because I think all centers of production outside of Hollywood, Atlanta is Tyler Perry, and Austin, Texas is Richard Linklater and Robert Rodriguez, and of course New York was Woody Allen and Spike Lee and everything. So you really have to build up your human capital first. And so we've developed some great filmmakers out of the program at Manoa. We've introduced a new program at West Oahu, where our new facility goes online this fall, which has really been more transmedia based. So we've developed a lot of social media directors and videographers out there and YouTube type producers. So it's, we're really doing our best with that, but there's more to it than that. There's Creative Industries Lab, there's Hawaii Filmmakers Collective, there's Ohina Films, HIF, which is coming up on its 40th anniversary, is, has become the place to go to show your films, and a great venue for everybody. So I think there is an ecosystem out there, and what I noticed most is that, like Chris Kukunahana Movies film is coming out, just debuted at the Urban World Film Festival, and everybody I know worked on it, from a lot of our students to to a lot of the DPs here and stuff like that. So I think it's a COGCO effort, and I think it's coming into play in a very big way. And we look forward to, I'm really looking forward to Chris Yogi, who also went to Iolani, but he's one of our earliest ACM grads, and he came back and he shot his second feature with, why am I blanking? Your FOB star.
Randall Park?
No, the woman.
Randall.
Oh, Chris
Constance, woo.
Constance.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm like,
Constance.
whoa, Chris.
Constance started it. It was developed at Sundance. It was shot here. They basically, I think the AD was from the mainland, but most of the crew was from our school and everything. And they shot on the North Shore last summer, actually. So that'll be an interesting feature to see come out, because his first one,
Very cool.
August at Akiko's, was he got a huge rave review from the New Yorker, which declared him the love child of Barry Jenkins and One Car Wai. So we're looking forward to seeing more of those kinds of films coming from our own filmmakers. And we look forward to the twins making their directorial debut at some point, because they have also chosen to live here in Hawaii. And they of course worked on Moana and lots of other
And
projects.
Adrift. I just been talking to them
and
about
Adrift.
Adrift. I was late in watching it, but incredible film. And just sending aloha out to Aaron and Jordan.
Yeah. So we've got
Chris, Jordan brings up a good point, though. I mean, it's one of those things that we've been talking a lot about, mainland films coming to Hawaii and taking advantage of the incentive. But I think it's important also for local films here to take advantage of the incentive as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is also, I want to make sure that the mainlanders don't just come here and take and leave. You really want, and I know a lot of them want to give back, you know, and we talk about 10,000 hours in filmmaking, where some of the up and coming filmmakers just don't have the experience yet of some of the mainlanders, just because they haven't made as many films or TV shows. So that any opportunity that we can create to have more experienced folks come here and teach, mentor, executive produce, you know, really shepherd some of the local filmmakers, because I think now is the best time than ever before. As you guys may know, in Hollywood right now, the trend is towards diversity and inclusion. Hollywood is looking for fresh new voices. And Hawaii has so many interesting stories that have not yet been told for the broader audience. So when you're talking about fresh stories, you know, Hawaii has a treasure trove of them. And so how do you get those stories and develop it in a way that you can expose them to the rest of the world?
Yeah. So how are you, given that, how are you approaching the live action remake of Lilo and Stitch for Disney?
Yeah, I can't talk too much about it, other than I have a filmmaker who spent a lot of time here. His family has spent a lot of time here as well. Actually, I don't want to give away too much, but part of his family lives here in Oahu. And really about how do we make the film culturally authentic and bring on the right, certainly casting it in the right way, casting it locally. I think we can use Aladdin as a great example. You know, I'm really proud of that movie, and that was a huge success, but it was also Disney's most successful and most culturally diverse movie. And people who watched the movie really appreciated that we didn't whitewash the movie, and we cast the leads in a culturally authentic way. And then if you look at Aladdin, that's going to be the approach that we take to Lilo and Stitch, really casting it locally, bring on the right consultants, make sure we explore the culture, and honestly show Hawaii in a way that people haven't seen before. There's still areas of Hawaii that you don't see in Jumanji or Jurassic World that we hope to explore with Donnie's help.
Yeah. We have a couple of very specific sales questions, which from George Russell. What has been your standout takeaways regarding pre-sales and or marketability from international sales agents when offered a Hawaii-centric limited series and/or indie feature? Either of the producers can take this one.
Melvin, I'll let you take this. I've never done an indie feature, so.
You know, I think I would look at it as, you know, take advantage of everything you can. And, you know, the sales aspect of it is so crazy and weird. I mean, the last time I did something like that was before streaming. So it was an entirely different scenario, you know? But I think with like streamers like Netflix and Hulu, especially now, where like the sort of acquisitions game is better and it's more streamlined, where you can really get movies that are niche, which were thought of as niche at one point, onto something that it could possibly be seen, you know? And I think if you can take advantage, with physical production, if you can take advantage of any sort of incentive and, you know, low budget incentive situation, I would do it. Am I completely missing the question? Sorry, it was like slightly, my internet was coming in and out a little bit. Trying to
No,
find
I
the
would just
question.
add to what Melvin said, which is I think
Yeah.
independent films are going to be incredibly difficult in this COVID age. You know, I'm
Yeah.
about to launch a TV show, and
Oh, yeah.
Amy's lucky enough where Amy's had a show that was already shooting before COVID.
Right.
So her
Mhm.
insurance company is already covering that show. I'm about to start a show in October that's a new show, and no insurance company wants to insure you for COVID.
Right.
And
Wow.
so studios have to self-insure, and that's
Yeah.
super risky. And if there's an independent film or TV show, you just can't afford it. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about what Amy's show has to do to bring in additional PPE and different protocols. That raises the cost of these shows by 15, 20%. And an independent film, you can't afford that. And so I think that's gonna be a big issue. So George, to answer your question, I really wouldn't focus on independent right now, just because I think in a COVID world, it's just gonna be financially, I think it's close to impossible to do it.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that assessment, because right now the biggest challenge for us is deploying this safe way forward, protocols, and making sure, convincing the public that is wary of COVID that, you know, the industry can do it, and that they have the full support of the studios to do it, because it's going to be tough for the little guys going forward to be able to successfully afford to produce in this kind of an environment.
I mean, yeah, and I going through it right now, like, it's not just the costs and of like COVID, like just not the physical costs of getting tests or whatever you need to do. It's actually, I'm looking at it as you need to budget more time. Because you don't know what it's going to be like when you, I mean, Amy, you do, but like for a whole new cast and a whole new show that hasn't worked together before, my guess is it's just going to take longer, you know, and that costs money.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing, right now we're doing 2 episodes simultaneously so that we're able to utilize, you know, try to schedule all the scenes that are at one location are shot at the same time. So, I mean, we are taking more time, but we are working more efficiently than we were before. So, I mean, it's sort of working out, although our schedule is going to be longer. Our 22 episodes will take much longer than before, and we're not going to get much time off.
So Clarissa is asking about, does the financial aspect of shooting in Hawaii pose an issue in trying to turn it into some sort of production hub similar to LA? And I'll just start by saying the reality is LA is expensive in itself, and California has had to introduce a lottery system to try to attract some shows back, but that's why people go to Georgia. That's why people used to go to Louisiana until they kept their situation. Some things are driven a little differently, like Netflix made a long-term deal with the Albuquerque studios. They've also just made a long-term deal with one of the Vancouver studios. I know in my conversations, they've talked about becoming sort of an anchor tenant for us here. But I think both Melvin, because he's exploring budgets right now, can explain why it's so much more, well, they already sort of have, why it's so much more expensive to shoot here.
Yeah, I mean, I will second what you were talking about, like rolling back the cap and all that stuff helps because it offsets the cost of having to ship something here, or just you know, the importation of all that stuff, you know. And I think it would be great. That would be the big first step in like turning Hawaii into a production hub.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Jordan has another question. It's a follow-up to the New Zealand model that I mentioned. The majority of filmmakers such as Meta, Nikki Caro, Wayratter, and most recently Mulan, and Taika launched their early films with financial support and backing from the New Zealand government. What can we as a community do to help promote, support, and encourage meaningful backing for emerging filmmakers? You know, I think, Jordan, as you know, every nation has a national film commission, and it was designed, and they financed their own films because they felt they had to compete with Hollywood. America is the only place that doesn't have the equivalent of that, though they do obviously have individual foundations and stuff that that do fund filmmaking under different circumstances. I'm thinking of my friends at the Vilcek Foundation that fund films for immigrant American filmmakers and stuff. And I think there are other opportunities like that, but maybe other people, Donnie, you folks know who might be doing that.
Well, Hawaii's in this very kind of daunting position of having to compete with other countries, really more than we compete with other US states. And like New Zealand. And that makes it really, really hard for us because we've never had a dedicated film fund. We have a give back through the tax credit program that is, equal to 0.1% of a qualified budget or qualified spend in Hawaii. But, that equates to, for the biggest budget projects, maybe $60,000, $70,000. That's not to say that it is doing good work, and Chris can attest to that. And it is helping to support our students from all age ranges in our public and charter schools. But it's really difficult for Hawaii to compete with other countries. We've talked about it for a long, long time, this idea of establishing a film fund that would be comparable to what, New Zealand as a country offers its indigenous filmmakers.
Jordan brought up the example of Go for Broke as an example of a local film getting state support.
Well, that was a grant and aid, and that was a grant and aid that was provided by the legislature, and just in honor and remembrance of Senator Inouye, that the 442nd is beloved across the board. So that was a combination of, I think, pulling together the creative minds to do it, and convincing the legislature, which did not take much convincing because the 442nd is so beloved, that the idea, and even though many stories have been done about the 442nd, but just the idea of this, Stacey Hayashi's wanting to take advantage of the fact that a lot of these veterans were reaching very senior kupuna ages and wanting to do something while they were still, those of them that were still around, to be able to convey their, firsthand experiences for that. That was kind of like a perfect storm of all of these different, it was the subject matter, it was the legislature's support of the subject matter, it was the aging veterans, and just the passion that Stacey had to get this done as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm just going to say this is what producers do. Stacey had a huge passion for it. She worked on all of her relationships to make it happen. I think the late Mark Takai was a big patron of this and a good friend of hers. So, the reality of how I was able to start this program at the University of Hawaii was there were certain patrons in the legislature that said, yeah, we think we like your idea. And then I went out and found some alumni who were willing to write some pretty big checks to get it started and going. I didn't really get the resources from the university itself. And so it was really outlining a vision for something and then finding the constituency for it locally. And hopefully I think we've delivered in terms of what the investment has been by the state. But I think that's sort of in the absence of, and this is, I don't think maybe some states have film funds, but I'm not aware of any, but there are pockets of money from people who recognize the art form and want to pursue it. And as I said, one of them that comes to mind is the Vilcek Foundation, which works exclusively with immigrant filmmakers, but that could be somebody who's moved here from Asia, that could be somebody who's moved here from Tahiti or something, and that's something that's worth exploring. The internet is a wonderful thing in terms of finding all these potential pockets of money to pursue your dreams, but you do have to work at it.
Well, and the other thing I just want to add to that, Chris, is that we are seeing an emerging of indigenous Native Hawaiian filmmakers that we have never seen before. And the stories that Native Hawaiians have to tell in this day and age is phenomenal. You know, Chris's film Waikiki coming out, but just, you know, so many others that are at various stages of, you know, dreaming and creating and plotting and planning. But, you know, I'm not dismissing that Hawaii could really turn a corner very soon in terms of supporting these storytellers. And we, you know, we've had Pacific Islanders in Communications has had for several years in partnership with our Maori friends in New Zealand. We've had the Hawaiian Media Makers Conference and summits that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
We are still working on our comparable
Your brown book
that is comparable to the New Zealand Brown Book, to try to, you know, help and guide the process of media making in the context of this Pai'aina and these Hawaiian Islands and Hawaiian people and local people.
Yeah. So we have one of our faculty on the Maui campus, ACM Maui, Eddie. He comes out of the industry. He's a post-production guy, and he's asking about the opportunities for post-production here in Hawaii and visual effects. And I don't know, Dan and Melvin, you want to tackle that, or Donnie?
I'd like to hear what Dan and Melvin have to say about post-production, because
post-production has its whole other level of incentives that tend to be different from production incentives.
Right.
Yeah. I would love, I know, Chris, you're working on your facility. I would love to see it there. I think post-production is a very good place to sort of, in my opinion, at least, other people may think differently, but I think it's a really good place to sort of foster new talent. You know, it seems to be, in my opinion and just sort of experience on the shows, it's a really good place that you could take a shot on somebody who's a relatively young editor, you know, because mostly you have 3 or 4 different editors working on different episodes, and usually it's run by somebody who is your senior editor, and it's a good place to sort of foster in a new voice or somebody who doesn't have that much experience, and you know, give them a shot. And I think it's one of these things that if you build your facility, if you're shooting in Hawaii, it makes perfect sense just to, you know, to start it there. I mean, undoubtedly at some point when you mix, you're gonna have to go onto the mainland, go onto one of the stages, but you can do most of your work there, and it'd be great to have it nearby. I mean, one of the things that we did on Jumanji was we had one of our lead editors, you know, basically working out of the production office, and it'd be super easy. We didn't have it in Hawaii, we had it in Atlanta. It would be great in Hawaii though. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to showing you our new facility out in West Oahu, because we have a Dolby Atmos mixing stage. Dan actually has come out to take a look at some of the facilities that we put in, and I think we pretty much have everything. It's a little smaller than what you'd find at USC, but
it's so impressive though.
It's state of the art.
Yeah. It's cool.
So so I'm going to combine 2 questions into one, because they're kind of similar, but they're a little going in a different direction. One's a question for Dan Lin. Despite the drawbacks the panel has described for TV and film production in Hawaii, could you talk about why you decided to move to Hawaii? And then from local filmmaker Scott Tran, he says, how does an emerging filmmaker who grew up in Hawaii and now lives in LA return to Hawaii and tap into the film industry there? Are there any opportunities in Hawaii for emerging filmmakers? I'll leave that.
Well, I'll start with the first question. I think we all kind of touched on it, where there's just a tremendous opportunity here in Hawaii, where if we continue to keep the COVID numbers down, that it's one of the safest places to live and work and shoot. So I think that's one reason certainly I came here. Secondly, I think there's tremendous opportunity. You look at what has been built at West Oahu campus, and naturally there's more. That's the beginning of hopefully much more. And again, it's a state-of-the-art facility. When you look at Chapman, you look at USC, you look at NYU, it's amazing. I tell Chris, the students, I hope will realize how lucky they are to have that kind of facility here. But I think that's just the beginning. And so I came here because I'm just excited about the future here. And I'm excited about all the different voices and the storytelling that's happening here. And really just the opportunity that people here, unfortunately, you know, the the state has been decimated by the pandemic with tourism and all the related kind of flow through effects with small businesses. But I feel like there's an opportunity here. You know, I tell Chris that I view entertainment as manufacturing. The difference is that this is the manufacturing of content. And that's why I came here. Again, what Amy does is very sexy. Amy's in front of the screen. Everyone knows Amy, and Amy's famous. The rest of us are kind of grinding away behind the scenes, but we're manufacturing. You know, it could be any other business, but unlike other businesses that require huge capital intensive businesses, like you can't bring a car business here. It's just too expensive, and because of the island location, you can't do it. But because of entertainment, you can actually bring that here. So I came here because I feel like we could help to bring this kind of manufacturing to Hawaii.
Yeah, thank you. Donnie, I'm going to throw this to you because you are the one part Native Hawaiian, even though Amy plays one on the show, I think. But being a local producer here, it's paramount in defending cultural authenticity. What other crucial elements would streamers or sales agents be looking for in Hawaii-produced films?
Well, you know, first of all, I think that we're living in an age where audiences are hungry for authenticity. They're hungry to learn more about these special places, not just here in Hawaii, but all over the world. And film is kind of, and then you combine that with the content demand, the extraordinarily unprecedented high content demand right now because of the pandemic. And it's, you know, again, it feeds that hunger. And that's why, you know, part of my job is really education. And you try to do it in a diplomatic way so that you're not scaring producers away, but you're opening their eyes, because I think they genuinely want to know what it is that makes Hawaii tick and what the true story of Hawaii is. And it is not necessarily what you have seen in the media back in the 50s and the 60s, and we're living in a different time altogether. But we have this unique opportunity to kind of reshape Hawaii and redefine the Hawaii we want to see for our future. And like it or not, the pandemic has taught us that. The pandemic has given us this extraordinary opportunity for everybody to press pause and reset. And that is why, you know, this whole notion, hard as it is to get the industry back open again, we collectively as the film industry are offering the greatest amount of hope for our people right now, because it is clear that tourism is not going to be able to do it for us any longer to the degree that it did. And producers, writers, actors, directors are high spending tourists. And there was a spotlight, star advertiser spotlight the other day with our DBED director, Mike McCartney, and the head of Outrigger Hotels, talking about how we're not restarting tourism, we're resetting, we're pressing that reset button, but we need to look for tourists that are going to be quality tourists rather than quantity tourists. And that, my friends, is the film industry. So that kind of, you know, doesn't really answer the question, but I'm really focused on the idea of the opportunity that the COVID pandemic has really kind of created for the film industry. And with the Safe Way Forward document, I had a conversation with the, and I'll stop talking in a second, but I had a conversation with Lieutenant Governor a couple of days ago. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to brief him, since he's quarterbacking the reopening and October 15th of Trans-Pacific travelers, and they're going to have one test, and that negative test will be it for them. I wanted him to understand what lengths the film industry is going through to be supremely safe. And he is 1,000% on board with what we're doing. And so what I'm saying is, let's not lose this opportunity and just kind of lump the film industry in with Trans-Pacific travelers, either returning residents or tourists. Let's keep the film industry in its own sector, subject to its own higher standards of safety.
We have time for a couple more questions if anybody wants to ask some. But also, Donnie, could you just talk about the Brown Book a little bit? Because I'm not sure everybody knows what that is, what that means, and what a difference it's going to make.
Yeah. So, you know, up until we started talking about this at the first Hawaiian Media Makers Conference, which was sponsored by Pacific Islanders in Communications. And like I said, we had all of our New Zealand brethren there. But up until that time, there's a little section in our production directory that I wrote that's just a few paragraphs, and it's called Guidelines for Filming in Sensitive Hawaii Locations. It talks about our language, Olelo Hawaii. It talks about the incredible geologic diversity, ethnic diversity that exists here. But most importantly, it talks about our history and our culture, and how we are viewed in the world. And we realized very quickly that it's not enough to just have a couple of paragraphs. And there had been much success with the New Zealand Brown Book, where it is the taking, and that's gone through several editions, but it's essentially taking the creative media making realm and helping producers understand what it means to create in the context of a very unique culture. And so it's a digital, we plan for it to be digital because it's kind of like a living resource that is going to grow and expand over time. But we also realize that producers in this day and age have very short time spans that they can devote to this. So it's going to be like your Reader's Digest crib note to Hawaiian history, culture, and language, where they can click on a certain thing and have the need to know information of why Iolani Palace is unique unto the world, why Iolani Palace is so sensitive. And if they want to dig deep, talk about the overthrow of the monarchy, talk about why it's important to Native Hawaiians, talk about why this place is more special and sacred than this place, they can do that. The resource will be available to them. So I think it's just a guidebook, because producers in general, they don't know what they don't know. And I think they welcome the opportunity to learn like the rest of us.
It's a protocol book in a lot of ways. It's a protocol book. Right?
Interestingly, though, there's no definition for protocol in the Hawaiian language, because protocol, the essence of protocol is embedded in the DNA of our people. So it's not like there is a direct translation for the word protocol. Thank you, Aaron Salah, because he's the one that conveyed that to me.
Yeah. Candy Swiss was actually asking if the Brown Book will be available for schools as well.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be generally a public document, right?
Yes.
It's not just for
not only a public document for our schools and for our incoming producers, but our local producers as well. And it will be tied into our tax credit in some way, shape, or form. And it may be something as simple as just having the producers who are applying for the tax credit attest that they have reviewed that resource, and they have a cursory understanding of what it includes.
When is that going to be available?
Well, we've been working on it for several years now, but I am committed to see this before the end of next year, that it would be released before the end of next year. So we are very much wanting it, and it's way overdue.
I know that, Amy, you've called on a lot of cultural practitioners in the creation and the deepening of your character and your role on Magnum. You know,
it's really been left up to me. So it would be nice if that, because our writers are in Los Angeles and are primarily older white guys. So,
but as a Kama'aina, Amy, you're doing your homework, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I came in, I hit the ground running, and I was spending a lot of time sort of shadowing these people that seem to be the ones that I might be using as my muse. And I did all this research, and, none of it was really coming into the script. So it's getting deeper and deeper. sort of. I think there was last season we had an assistant, a writer's assistant that was from Hawaii. So she, I think, helped. She became sort of co-writer on a couple of episodes. But
Yeah.
it's been difficult. And this season there's more because I think she's been upgraded to an actual writer. So I think maybe there's more, but there's no cultural consultant. There's no, so.
Which is something that really does need to change. You know,
Yeah, it would be nice.
I've been working on
Yeah.
that for a very long time with Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum,
Right.
but I wanted to just give you a little word of encouragement, Amy, and tell you
Yes.
that the word kumu does not only mean
Right.
teacher, it means source
Right.
of knowledge. And so there's a very famous book, it's a multi-volume book called Nana Ike Kumu, and it means literally look to the source. And I am going to personally get you that 2-volume, and I am going to deliver it to you because it will be a wealth of information for you. So you need to know kumu means source of knowledge. So you are on
Yes.
the right track.
Thank you. I do what I can.
All right,
But I'm
so
also like, well, it's, I mean, I still have people. I have wonderful people that I have no qualms going and saying, what's
Yes.
this? I
What
don't
does
know.
that mean?
Yeah.
yeah, we
Is
appreciate
this
that.
okay? They wrote me.
Yeah. So,
So-
we have to wrap it up. This isn't so much
Thank
a
you.
question as a comment from one of Amy's co-stars, Kimmy Balmalero,
Oh.
who said that the Young Storyteller program is the best and that she was a mentor when she lived in LA, and it's a fantastic program. So we'll look forward to hopefully being able to do that here as well. Kimmy plays the coroner, right, on your show,
Yes.
and she was on 5-0. She was a crossover
Yes.
actor. Okay, all right. So now I'm going to ask Colin Moore, my colleague from the University of Hawaii, to join us and conclude the panel for today. I just want to thank everybody, Dan, Melvin, Amy, and Donnie, for joining us. I hope we didn't get to everybody's questions, unfortunately, but I hope we answered enough of them to make it worth your while. And we're so grateful that you could join us. I know there's so many Zooms that everybody has to go to these days. So the fact that we had such a fantastic turnout today is a testament to the interest in this industry in Hawaii, and I think the workforce that's out there and wants to see all of this succeed. So Colin, why don't you take over?
I agree. Thanks so much, Chris. It was just terrific to be here tonight with all these creative and innovative folks. And I certainly learned a ton about the film industry, which is not an opportunity I normally have. You know, one of the challenges over the next several years is to build a strong, more resilient economy as Hawaii recovers from COVID. And I think our conversation tonight showed that film production offers a real path. And I hope our policy leaders pay more attention to this vital and important industry. But it's also clear that there's more work we need to do on a policy level to become even more attractive to the industry. So thanks to the Inouye Institute for sponsoring. Thanks, of course, to Chris Lee for moderating, and all our terrific guests, Amy Hill, Dan Lin, Melvin Mar, and Donne Dawson. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Please spread the word about how important the film industry is to diversifying Hawaii's economy. Aloha.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Wow.
Aloha, everyone.
All right.
Ahuia.
Aloha.